This is a Miraculous Ladybug story called Secrets Within. When an akuma transforms people into what they are on the inside, Marinette and Adrien realize something very important as to who they are down to their very cores. It was something Marinette found pretty, and Adrien had to admit he liked it too initially. Now it represented frustration and temptation. The object in question? A hairpin. They had gone to the opening of the shattered iron statue as a date, figuring that since the married couple had been akumified over the statue, they, as Ladybug and Chat Noir, had a duty to see what all the fuss had been about. The statue had been a stunning and interesting piece of work, since it transformed as you walked around it. The front of it were two dragon-like creatures circling each other, and if you looked at it from the back, the statue transformed to be two humans with wings, caught in the same circular motion. As you walked around the sides, the forms dissolved into bits of shattered metal and glass, hence their chosen name, Shattered Iron. It was a stunning work of art, and they were more than happy to show up at the unveiling of the statue. Overall, it ended up being a fairly large venue, with other artists setting up booths in the nearby courtyard to sell their wares. Of course, the superhero duo was welcomed and thanked profusely by all the people there, but none so much as the once akumified victims, since their miraculous cleanse had fixed the statue. Once the unveiling was over with, they had perused the stalls, and that's when Ladybug had found the hairpin. Marinette had wanted to switch up her hairstyle a little, and since the pin was part of the Shattered Iron wares, she thought it would be a good idea to purchase it. It was a long bronze rod that had thin chains that were connected to three brightly colored balls of faceted glass on the other end. The balls swung free, and to her delight, she also discovered a tiny bronze bell that looked like Chat's attached to one of the balls. It was pretty and really cute, so when she showed it to him in her palm, Chat had given her an excited thumbs up, without even realizing the mistake that he had made. To be honest, the first time she had wore it, he had been stunned by how she looked with her hair all bundled up. She had looked older, more beautiful, more something. The bun look, as he dubbed it, had left him speechless, and he hadn't even noticed the hairpin. This was the second time she had worn the hairpin, and she hadn't even meant to this time. Marinette had been late getting into class, and in her rush, she had forgotten to grab two hairbands. Her hair was getting a little longer these days, and she hadn't wanted it to get in the way, especially since they had had science lab earlier that day, and their science teacher didn't appreciate loose hair around fire. There was no time to go back home, and for a moment she had resigned herself to wearing a simple ponytail, when she had remembered the hairpin still in her bag. With a smile, Marinette had bundled her hair up into a bun, placing the pin just right, so that the dangling balls swung free with every movement of her head. It was 2 classes later that Adrien had arrived, late from something his father had planned, and he had been happily surprised to see Marinette's hair up once more. Adrien loved the look, until they broke off into pairs to work on an in-class project. With a grin, Isla had switched seats with him, and he had been in heaven sitting next to the love of his life, until she turned away to get something from her bag. Sunlight streaming in from the windows hit the shiny little balls, catching his attention, and so far, he had yet to regain it. Every time she moved her head, the little balls moved glinting in the light, as they swung back and forth. The damn thing was taunting him, and he could just feel it. And to make matters worse, the stupid little balls chinked as they swung, making a pleasant little tinkling sound that Adrien knew that only he could hear. He wanted to paw at the stupid little balls, make them swing and chime and... "Adrien, are you okay?" Marinette asked, a look of concern crossing her features as she turned to face him fully. The shiny baubles vanished behind her head, and Adrien stiffened as he realized he had been staring. "Yeah, sorry, I was, distracted," Adrien muttered, cursing plague and his cat-like tendencies that came with him. Marinette blushed and turned once more, looking back down at her worksheet. The balls came swishing back into his peripheral vision, chinking as they swung free. He glanced at them, meaning to look away swiftly once more. Instead, his eyes were pinned to them as they danced, and it was only after his fingertips tapped one of them that he realized he had lost out to his inner chat once more. The little bell chimed audibly as he swatted at it, and Marinette twitched, swiftly looking up and causing his hand to brush her cheek as she turned. Adrien yanked his hand away, blushing furiously once more, and finally turned his attention to the worksheet before him. He kept his eyes pinned on the worksheet for the rest of the period, and not on the bright dancing balls that glittered, drawing his attention, and Adrien huffed, shaking his head irritably, not seeing the concerned glance that Marinette gave him. The bell finally rang, and Adrien was off like a shot, not even thinking about where he was supposed to be going next. By the time Adrien finally remembered he had math next, he was almost late. Thankfully, he arrived in time, and Marinette handed him his bag, which he had forgotten in the previous class. Thanking her with a smile, Adrien climbed up the one step and sat behind her in his seat for this class. It was then that Adrien realized his error. He sat behind Marinette, behind those bright, colorful, stupid balls that swung with every twitch of her head. Nails dug into his desk, and Adrien could practically feel his body vibrating with the desire to pounce. Pounce and play, and swish the baubles across the floor to pounce again, and a hand descended on his shoulder, making him yelp in surprise, as he tried and failed to leap to his feet. His feet had been tucked under the chair legs while he was sitting, and feet tangling with the legs once more, Adrien fell over sideways, pulling the whole chair down with him. He crashed to the floor with a clatter, making the whole room freeze. "Mr. Agreste!" their teacher cried, shocked, and Adrien glanced up to see Nino, hand hanging in the air, a confused, surprised expression in place. "Dude?" Nino whispered, and Adrien felt his face flush. Marinette was at his side in an instant, a look on her face that screamed Ladybug protection mode. Before he could say a word, she pressed a hand to his forehead, then turned to the teacher. "I think Adrien has a fever. May I take him to the nurse's office?" Marinette asked. The teacher nodded, still looking a little confused, while Marinette hauled a stunned Adrien to his feet, grabbed their bags, and pulled him out the door. "Okay, tell me what is going on," Marinette said as they walked down the hall. Adrien sighed, keeping up with her, as he tried not to think about the swaying balls in the back of her hair. It was harder than he thought, since it had a little bronze bell that chimed with every damned step she took, drawing his attention right back to the accursed thing. Well, Adrien muttered distractedly, his hand rising on his own to swat at the little baubles. They chinked again, and Marinette twisted up to look at him, seeing the way his eyes followed the hair stick. Suddenly, her eyes went wide, and she froze mid-step, causing Adrien to run into, then trip over her. He yelped, bounced onto the balls of his feet, and fell forward, landing on all fours before he could face-plant. "Marinette!" Adrien whined, as he twisted around, knowing that she knew he hated it when she stopped without warning. Marinette dropped into a crouch before him silently, and reached back, pulling the stick from her hair. Her hair dropped loose around her shoulders, framing her pretty face, and Adrien felt what little annoyance he had flee his mind altogether. She was stunning with her hair down, and he reached forward from his own crouch, ready to pull him into his arms, when the sunlight struck the hair stick. It shimmered across the balls, making little rainbows, and the bell tinkled pleasantly as they jerked and shifted in the light. He batted at them, a smile growing on his face, letting out a frustrated mewl when they moved out of his reach. They disappeared behind a back, and Adrien pounced without thinking, wanting the baubles back out again. Laughter bubbled up from underneath him, and with growing horror, Adrien realized that he had pounced on Marinette without even realizing it. She laughed harder at the look on his face, and Adrien felt his face light on fire in embarrassment. "You've been chasing my hair stick all morning," Marinette exclaimed between giggles. "That's why you've been so distracted. Why didn't you tell me before?" Adrien, now in control once more, shifted off of her, and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly as he helped her sit up. "I didn't notice them last time you wore it. And it was just so sudden and random. I just couldn't control it this time. That's because you never play, Plag's voice said as he peered up out of Adrien's pocket at Marinette. Play? Marinette asked, slipping the hair stick into her bag before Adrien could catch sight of it again. Yes, play. Kittens need to play, even if they're not allowed to by their parents. Since Mr. Stick-in-the-Mud here never lets his playful cat instincts out, they're bleeding through to his everyday life, Plag answered. Oh, Marinette said quietly. Is that why you practically vibrate whenever I pull out yarn? Yes, Plag answered, as Adrien said, No. Marinette snickered and pulled the hair stick out of her bag, watching Adrien's eyes and Plag's as they both caught sight of it. She waved it slightly, and Adrien's hand snapped up to swat at it. Plag zoomed from his pocket to tangle in the chains, and Adrien gave a grumpy-sounding hiss at the sight. Plag twisted in the chains to return a hiss, and for several seconds the air was filled with unhappy hissing. Marinette busted out laughing, lowering the hair stick and Plag to her lap, snapping Adrien back to normal once more. Adrien groaned and fell back onto his butt, face in his hands. Plag, on the other hand, wiggled through the chains to fasten his teeth onto one of the balls, causing an unpleasant squeak to emerge from his jaws. Plag, don't try and eat it, Tiki cried, as she flew from Marinette's purse to swat the cat Kwame on the head. But it's shiny, and I want to keep it, Plag answered. Tiki sighed and looked up at Marinette, who as of yet hadn't stopped laughing. You two should buy some cat toys together. Otherwise, this will start happening more, Tiki said. We will, right after school, Marinette answered, between giggles, as she nodded her head at Tiki. Tiki pulled Plag off the hair stick, and swiftly Marinette hid it in her school bag, while Tiki dragged Plag into her purse, promising pats to make him go with her. Adrien still sat across from her, head in his hands, and Marinette crawled forward to wrap him in a hug. I am a human being, not a cat. Why am I having trouble controlling this? Especially when you don't, Adrien cried, pressing his face into Marinette's shoulder. Marinette rubbed a hand through his soft hair with a sigh. She had an idea of why, but she wasn't sure if she should tell him. Seeing as though he was so upset, Marinette decided it would probably be the best if she told him her idea. I think it's because you never let yourself have fun, Marinette whispered. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have fun with me when we go on dates and when you hang out with Nino, but for the most part, you always have to act so reserved. When you're chat, though, you're free, and I think bottling up that side of yourself is what's causing the issue. Plus, I do have issues. I just channel it differently. I garden and drink flowery tea, and I really can't stand the cold anymore. Adrien pulled back as she trailed off to stare Marinette in the eyes. Then, all at once, he slow blinked at her, making a smile spread across her face. With a giggle, Marinette returned the blink, and Adrien burrowed his head into her hair, hiding his bright red face as he sighed into his shoulder. They stayed like that for several minutes, then Adrien climbed to his feet, pulling Marinette up with him. Let's go buy some stupid cat toys, he said, and Marinette looked up at him surprised. You want to skip school? She asked, shocked to say the least. It's a half day. Lunch is next anyways, and I have a photo shoot later, so now's the perfect time. Plus, we've been out of class long enough that if we go back now it'll look weird, Adrien answered. Marinette chuckled. All right, kitty, let's go get you some toys. After all, I'd hate to see you get into my yarn box as you are now. Adrien felt himself blush at her words, even as they started to walk forward towards the school entrance. Together, they left the school, aiming for a small pet shop that was nearby. The store was cute and quite small, but they had a decent selection of cat toys. Adrien had a few issues with the feathered ones, and Plag didn't help one bit, since he thought it was funny to shove the feathered ends of some of the toys into Adrien's face, causing him to sneeze and curse at the cat Kwame. Tiki finally snatched Plag away and dragged him back into Marinette's purse, letting the two teens shop in peace. After a bit of searching, they got a selection of cat toys that caught Adrien's attention, including a laser pen that had him twitching the moment she turned it on. Plag was obsessed with a chunky mouse toy, and overall they left the store quite satisfied. "Hey, do you want to bring some of these balls home with you to bat around?" Marinette asked as they walked to her house. Adrien shook his head. "No, if they were found, it would cause some questions to come about that really I'd rather not answer." Marinette smiled. "Well, I guess you'll have to get your fill then when you come over." It was strangely quiet outside as they made their way to her house, and after a moment, Marinette realized that there were no people in the park nearby. It was unsettling, and glancing up at Adrien, she realized that he seemed to feel the same way. They paused as one just as they reached the door of the bakery, looking around. "You don't think," Adrien began, just as the door to the bakery blew open. "There you kids are! Hurry and get inside! There's an akuma attack taking place," Tom snapped, grabbing the surprised teens before they could move and drag them inside. Her name was Lark, and she was a year younger than most of the kids in her grade at College Francis DuPont. She had skipped a grade, and because of the age difference as well as her high intelligence, she really wasn't at home chatting with the other students. For the most part, she avoided people in the school, except for Rose and Marinette, who were always kind and more than happy to share whatever sweets they had that day. She really desperately tried to avoid Chloe, though, who always seemed to enjoy tormenting anyone she could get her perfectly manicured claws on. As lunch rolled around, Lark realized that it was another one of those days where Chloe was in rare form. Apparently her Adrikins wasn't feeling well, and his wannabe girlfriend Marinette had helped him from the classroom, only to disappear from school together. Lark scoffed at the screeching. Marinette was one of the nicest people she had ever met, and from what she could see and the way Adrien looked at her, they really did care about each other. She was just getting up from her seat when Chloe stormed by, knocking her over. "Hey!" Lark cried as she hit the ground, her stuff scattering. "Ugh! Watch it, you little brat!" Chloe shrieked. Lark climbed back to her feet. "You ran into me, Queen Bee, so back off," she snapped back, even as she bent over and started to pick her things up off the ground. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who my daddy is?" Chloe shrieked, hands going to her hips as her face turned red. Lark glanced up. "Yes, and I don't really care. Go scream at someone else." Picking up a book off the ground, she stood upright as Chloe gave a wordless snarl. The hand came out of nowhere, slamming into the side of her face and sending her crashing back to the ground once more. Lark laid there, stunned as her face stung, and Chloe glared down at her. Then, all at once, rage surged through her. "How dare you slap me, you self-centered!" Lark cried, surging up off the ground even as she chucked the book in her hand at Chloe's head. Alarm flashed across Chloe's face as she ducked and stumbled back. Most of the students were cowed by words alone, and when she did usually strike, tears and sobs always filled the air. No one had ever dared to strike back at her, especially not the smaller, younger students. When she realized that Lark hadn't been cowed by the blow and was instead furious, Chloe let out a squeal of fright before she took off running, shouting for Sabrina. Thankfully for Chloe, Sabrina managed to get between them, and Lark crashed into her, falling to the ground for the third time in less than 2 minutes. Sorry, but you should calm down, and, please don't hurt Chloe," Sabrina babbled, trying to get a hold of Lark and calm her down. Furious in seeing Chloe vanish around the corner of the building, Lark shoved Sabrina out of the way and got to her feet once more. "I won't hurt her. I'm going to kill her," Lark snarled, as she took off across the courtyard and turned the corner a moment later. She didn't even see the butterfly land on her hairband, but she froze as a voice entered her mind. "I am Hawkmoth. And your rage is a force to be reckoned with, my dear. Tell me, what seems to be troubling you? Hawkmoth asked. I'm tired of Chloe always getting what she wants and never facing the consequences of her actions, Lark snapped, feeling her fury build to new heights. Ah, yes. I can give you the power to reveal what she is down to her very core. All I ask in return is for you to acquire Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous. Does that seem like a fair trade, Exposer? Hawkmoth asked. Yes, Hawkmoth, Lark answered, and the fury within her burst forth, coating her in darkness. Adrien and Marinette were stuck inside. Tom had yanked them in before they could even think of running, much less coming up with an excuse to allow them to go after the akuma. How do you know there's an akuma attack, Papa? Marinette asked, and Adrien was glad that she had said something first. Adrien had wanted to ask, but Tom was still a very friendly, slightly terrifyingly large man, whose daughter he was dating. It's on the news, sweetheart. It started at your school, apparently, but now it's moved out into the street, Tom answered, swiftly shepherding them away from the large glass front windows. Marinette and Adrien shared an exasperated look. Last time we skipped school, huh? Marinette mouthed, and Adrien managed to hold in a snicker before they were shepherded up the stairs and into the main house. The TV was on in the living room, and Sabine smiled at the two kids when she saw them come in. I see Tom found you two. Apparently attack started at your school. Was school and everything okay when you were there? Sabine asked, and Adrien nodded mutely as Marinette gave her mom a hug. School was fine, Mama. We left during lunch and missed all the action, Marinette answered. Sabine murmured as she glanced at the TV screen. I think it's chasing someone. Marinette and Adrien came around to the side to see what she was talking about, while Adrien muttered, A dozen cookies says it's Chloe. A blonde-haired girl was running down the street, hands in the air screaming, and Marinette sighed. What did she do now? Sabine looked between the two teens and barely hid a smile. They didn't seem to be surprised one bit by the fact that one of their classmates was being chased by an akuma. The camera panned from Chloe to the actual akuma, and Marinette muttered, That's new. The girl was colorful, to be blunt. A large pouch sat on one of her hips, while poofy pom-pom-like balls covered her shoulders, wrists, ankles, and what Marinette assumed were some kind of shorts. The pom-poms were all rainbow-colored and detachable, if what they were watching was correct. A cream one-piece suit covered everything that the pom-poms didn't, and vibrant purple hairbands sat nestled in the akuma's super curly rainbow-colored hair. Marinette and Adrien shared a look as he came to stand beside her, the both of them realizing at the same time where the akuma was hidden. I am Exposer, and I shall totally reveal who you really are, Chloe, the akuma yelled jovially as she jumped over the cars in her pursuit of Chloe. A flung pom-pom exploded as it landed, and suddenly the car it struck vanished in a rainbow-colored cloud, while Chloe sprinted away screaming once more. A savage smile lit up the Exposer's face, and she happily pursued, ignoring everyone and everything else. Marinette gripped Adrien's hand hard. She didn't like Chloe, but she didn't want her to see her hurt, or anyone else injured, since Chloe was stupidly running towards the heart of Paris, and they both knew that it was only a matter of time before someone else got caught in the crossfire. Let's go see if the Ladybug blog has any more info, Marinette said, and pulled Adrien towards the stairs to her room. Sabine watched them go, a small smile playing across her face. Are you kids hungry? I'll have some lunch ready in about an hour for you. Okay, great. We'll be in my room being quiet or watching a movie and stuff, so don't worry, bye, Marinette answered, dragging Adrien up her stairs. The trap door slammed shut behind them, and Marinette tossed the cat toys up into her bed as she ran to the computer. Marinette? Adrien asked, confused and looking towards her skylight, wondering if they were actually going to go after the akuma or not. You transform, and see if you can spot where they are and get moving. I'll follow just in just a second. I'm putting on a movie so that my parents don't investigate a lack of sound, Marinette answered. Smart, Adrien murmured, earning a smile and a wink from Marinette. Plag, claws out. One flash of green light later, and Chat sprung up into her bed in a single bound, opened her skylight, and vanished out into the balcony. Meanwhile, Marinette clicked a random movie as soon as her computer started up, and making sure that the speakers were loud enough that it could be heard through her door, but not be disruptive. She started to get a move on. We're gonna have to finish up this battle really quick. If my parents come up and find us missing, they'll have a fit, Marinette hissed as Tiki floated up beside her ear. Well, you have about an hour at least, and it seems like you already know where the akuma is, so it shouldn't be too hard, right? Tiki asked. Marinette groaned. I don't know, Tiki. It seems like the stranger the akuma are dressed, the crazier their powers are. In any case, we need to get moving. Spots on. A moment later, Ladybug was out the skylight and leaping from rooftop to rooftop as she played catch-up with Chat Noir. As she drew even with him, the sound of an explosion echoed 3 streets over, and the two of them raced towards the noise, knowing that it was where the akuma would be. So, what do we think this exposer person can do? Ladybug yelled. Chat Noir snorted, launching himself over the peak of a rooftop. I don't know, m'lady, but hopefully it leaves us with our clothes on. Ladybug stumbled. Really, Chat? She demanded, as Chat laughed. I can't help it that Hogmoth picked such a stripped-down name. Chat! Ladybug yelled, but unfortunately he was too far away from her to swat him for it. Chat laughed again, making sure to stay out of arm's reach, even as they swiftly approached their target. They couldn't see the akuma, but as they came near the heart of the noise, they found that they could easily hear what was going on. I shall expose what you are down to your very core, the exposer yelled. I'm innocent, Chloe shrieked. Someone save me! As the superhero duo cleared the roofline, they could only watch in horror as the akuma let fly with one of her rainbow-colored pom-poms. No! Ladybug yelled, throwing her yo-yo in an attempt to stop the attack. Unfortunately, they had arrived the slightest bit too late, and the attack struck before the yo-yo could come even close to stopping it. Rainbow smoke poofed away from Chloe as she screamed, her high-pitched voice getting even higher as the smoke enveloped her. Her scream cut out, only to be replaced by coughing, and then, as the smoke quickly dissipated, it revealed a very small 4-year-old Chloe. Chloe continued coughing for a second, waving a hand in front of her face that was quickly covered by 2 large sleeves. Then, as her eyes opened, the world froze, her little mouth dropping. What you do? Chloe shrieked adorably, waving her chunky sleeve-covered arms as she tried to move forward, only to trip on her now too large pants. She fell flat on her face, shrieking questions dissolving into simple screams of fury. Her legs kicked and her arms waved inside the too large clothes, giving the slight impression of a limp sock puppet. Ladybug practically shoved a fist in her mouth to keep from laughing out loud, and Chat snickered quietly as he muttered, Oh, that makes complete sense. Oh my gosh! The truth comes out! I always knew you were a spoiled little brat, but this is ridiculous, Exposer cried, as she slowly bounced over to the shrieking 4-year-old. Chloe stopped her tantrum for a brief second to look up and realized that she was in danger. She gave an ear-splitting wail, and Exposer actually paused for a brief second, wincing at the incredible volume the child's small lungs could produce. Jack, grab Chloe! Ladybug yelled over the shrieking, as they were shaken free of their mirthful shock, and they launched themselves into action. Leave that obnoxious child alone, Ladybug yelled, throwing her yo-yo once more to catch the akuma by the waist. She yanked back hard as she landed, while Chat scooped up the still screaming Chloe and darted off to find a safe place to deposit her. Feeling the string go taut around her, Exposer bounced backwards with the string's pull, flipping easily over Ladybug's head as she landed on the roof of a parked car. Did you see the spoiled brat? Exposer laughed, slipping out of the yo-yo's grasp before Ladybug could recover. Chloe turned into a 4-year-old. I wish I had a camera. I wonder what other people will turn into, the exposer chuckled, ripping a pom-pom off her shoulder and lightly lobbed it at Ladybug, making her jump back. It missed her completely, and the smoke rapidly dissipated, although her words made Ladybug take yet another step back. Exposer had the higher ground, which was annoying but not impossible to deal with. Without a second thought, Ladybug spun the yo-yo in her hands, ready to take her on once more. You can't go around zapping people for fun, Ladybug snapped, then wondered if Exposer had heard a single thing she'd said. The Exposer was ignoring Ladybug, one hand held up in the traditional wait a moment pose, as she tilted her head. A moment later, a purple mask outlined her features, and she sighed, waving a hand. Yeah, I know. She's right here, and honestly, I don't see the appeal. Ladybug went silent, realizing that the exposer was talking to Hawkmoth. As she listened to the strange one-sided conversation, Ladybug shifted to the side, lining up a better angle for herself to attack from, and noticed out of the corner of her eye a black shape. It appeared on the rooftop, and Ladybug smiled to herself, realizing that Chat had returned. Look, Exposer, why don't we just relax and talk about whatever just happened? If you will just let me purify your akuma. The exposer flinched and leapt back further, leaping so that she was standing on the roof of the car. No way. Chloe deserves to stay a little brat forever with the way she treats everyone around her. Besides, now I'm really curious. I wonder what you will look like when your true self is revealed. Ladybug spun her yo-yo in one hand, ready to attack or to dodge, as she said, Sorry, but I don't feel like being exposed for the world to see. Mentally, Ladybug winced, glad that Chat was on the roof and not beside her for once. The exposer laughed. I'm not giving you much of a choice. The mask faded around Exposer's face, and in the next second she plucked a pom-pom from her shorts, slamming it down into the car underneath her, and Ladybug threw her yo-yo forward. It vanished in through the smoke, and Ladybug dodged back, avoiding more smoke as it swiftly dissipated. A pom-pom flew at her in the next second, and she spun her yo-yo, causing it to burst before it struck her. Exposer kept up the pressure as she ran at Ladybug, throwing pom-pom after pom-pom and not leaving Ladybug any room to attack in retaliation. In the next instant, a snarl filled the air, and Exposer turned to see Chat leaping at her from the rooftops. Ladybug saw the smirk quirk Exposer's lips as she threw something at her falling partner. Chat, don't let it hit you! Ladybug yelled out in warning, as Exposer threw another 2 pom-poms at her, making her dodge one and the other burst with her yo-yo. The one she dodged hit a car next to her, and as the smoke cleared, she could make out a small toy? Chat brought his staff up before him, spinning as he deflected the object thrown at him, so it went high above his head. Gotcha! Exposer cheered happily, and raised her palm, a beam of greenish light shooting from it to the object that he deflected. A full-size car suddenly appeared above him, and Chat yelped as if his feet hit the ground, tripping as he tried to get out of the incoming vehicle's way. Ladybug's yo-yo flew about his arm, and he was yanked out of the way, car smashing into the concrete milliseconds later. Chat hit the ground on his side, then rolled as Ladybug's yo-yo released him, and he scrambled back so that he was pressed against her legs. What was that? Chat yelled on all fours, ready to dodge the next barrage of attacks. She made a freaking car come out of nowhere! Ladybug's hand pressed to his head, and ever so gently scratched behind his ears, helping to calm both of them. The pom-pom she throws at transforms things, making people look like who they are on the inside, and objects the opposite of what they are, I suppose. She jerked her thumb at the toy car that sat where the real one had been moments before. I don't know what that beam of light was, but it reverted the car back to normal. So I guess overall, don't get hit by her attacks. Great. So she's like an opposite of Reflecta? Chat grumbled. Exposer doubled over laughing, pointing at them, and Chat hissed at her, even as he pressed his shoulder into Ladybug's thigh. Oh, that was great. And the look on your guys' face when the car returned to its regular size was fantastic. Forget taking your miraculous. I just want to play, Exposer cried and launched himself at her, scooping something off at the ground as she came. Ladybug and Chat separated instantly, going to either side of Exposer as she ran forward. Pom-poms exploded in their wake, hitting random objects as they deflected Exposer's attacks. A stand of newspapers became a tree, a lamppost became a torch, and a fleeing cat became a tiger that roared in terror before fleeing down an alleyway. You weren't even aiming at us that time, Chat snarled, rushing in towards her as he made an attempt at taking her down. Oops, Exposer cackled, as they heard screams come from the direction the tiger had ran in through. Throwing a pom-pom at Chat, he was shocked as he used his baton to bat it right back at her. It exploded in mid-air, and a large boulder appeared out of nowhere, coming to crash down in front of her, blocking her vision with smoke and stone. Exposer stumbled back from the rock and missed Chat as he leapt to the top of the boulder. In the next second, his staff stuck her squarely in the chest, as Ladybug's yo-yo took out her legs, knocking her to the ground. Chat leapt at her, snatching her at her hairband, and Exposer reacted with a squeal of fury, kicking upwards and hitting him in the crotch. Chat let loose a yowl as he jerked to the side and collapsed to his knees. Swiftly, Exposer flipped back, coming to her feet pom-pom in hand, and Ladybug yelled, "Chat, move!" Chat was already rolling out of the way, scrambling sideways as he managed to get his legs working properly once more. Exposer's arm came down, pom-pom ready to release at point-blank range, when Ladybug's yo-yo span about her hand and yanked her arm back before tossing her sideways into yet another car. A pom-pom in the other hand struck the car as she did, causing rainbow smoke to poof away from her, hiding her. Ladybug yanked her yo-yo back in her hand and watched for any sign of movement as Chat scrambled behind a nearby car, a pained look on his face. Ladybug flinched in sympathy, then yelped as a boulder suddenly flew at her from the slowly dissipating rainbow smoke. Dodging to the side, the boulder smashed down into the cobbles, throwing them up everywhere, even as a second boulder flew at her. Flipping backwards, her back struck a wall, and she had to dart to the right to avoid the newest boulder that smashed into the wall behind her. Ladybug yelped as debris rained down around her head, and just barely managed to block a pom-pom that sailed right at her face. "Coming!" Chat yelled, as a third boulder flew at her way, and Ladybug darted to the side, her foot catching on a chunk of fallen wall, sending her sprawling. The boulder smashed into the wall above her, and in the next second, Chat scooped her up off the ground, throwing her forward as the wall around them came down apart entirely. Broken pieces of the wall struck Chat before he could get clear, causing him to hit the ground in her place. Dust billowed up, hanging in the air, and hiding Chat from sight. "Chat!" Ladybug screamed, twisting around to scramble forward through the dust that hung over the ground. "I'm okay, Ladybug," Chat answered loudly, not realizing that she was so close, and in the next second their hands met. In a softer voice he continued, "No damage done, although my leg is pinned." The dust hung hazily in the air, but it was quickly settling, allowing the two of them to see Exposer, and more importantly, each other. "You won't be okay for long," Exposer cried cheerfully, skipping towards them as she tossed a pom-pom in one hand. "Get yourself free. I'll keep her busy," Ladybug said, pressing a swift kiss to Chat's forehead before throwing herself forward to rush Exposer head-on. Using her yo-yo to break the pom-poms apart as they flew at her, Ladybug played a furious game of follow the leader. Try as she might, Ladybug was having a heck of a time getting close, but that meant that Chat was safe as he dug himself out. Exposer was an annoyingly limber akuma, able to keep up with Ladybug as they fired off and dodged each other's attacks. Even worse was the fact that Exposer kept picking up and randomly throwing things at Ladybug off the street. Case in point, a dime the size of a hubcap came flying out of a rainbow-colored cloud, clipping her shoulder hard when Ladybug was too surprised to fully dodge. It spun her around, bruising her, and Ladybug dropped low, flinging her yo-yo out to catch Exposer around the legs. Before the akuma could leap away, Ladybug yanked upwards, pulling Exposer's feet out from underneath her. A snarl filled the air as a black blur flew past Ladybug, and in the next second Chat was free, and furious as he leapt at Exposer, claws swiping at her headband when she started to sit up. Exposer let out a shriek of surprise, a puff of rainbow smoke appearing as an iron spike shot from her hands. Chat hadn't been expecting that, and twisting a little too late, the spike gouged a line across his ribcage. He yelped, eyes blowing wide as he started to fall, unable to do anything as Exposer's face lit up with a very nasty grin. "Chat!" Ladybug screamed, starting to yank the yo-yo line towards her, but it was already too late. Chat stumbled to the side, one hand plastered across the wound, and Exposer twisted around, slamming a large rainbow-colored pom-pom into him. Smoke enveloped him as Ladybug hauled back on the line, chucking the akuma over the top of a car and into the wall behind it. Running forward, Ladybug caught Chat as he stumbled from the dissipating rainbow smoke. "Chat, are you okay?" she demanded, eyeing the blood that peeked out from between his fingers. He coughed and winced, happy to lean against her. "That really hurt, but other than the scratch, I'm fine." Swiftly, Ladybug looked him over, peeling his hand back to eye the wound, however brief. Being critically injured on a fairly average basis gave them a terrible assumption that if a wound didn't drop them immediately, then it probably wasn't all that serious. This wound wasn't gushing blood, but she couldn't see bone, so Ladybug let Chat clamp a hand back over the sluggish flow to look his costume over quickly. Nothing on him had changed, even though he had been hit by the Exposer's pom-pom, although the gash in his side had to hurt. A car alarm went off suddenly as Exposer slammed her fists into the hood. "That hurt," she snarled, and all at once threw something at them, while firing that same strange green beam of light from her palm, right behind it. There was a sudden whomp sound, and a full-size bus sprang into being, soaring through them on a collision course. "Oh, crap," Chat managed, ears falling, but Ladybug already had sprung into action. Tossing her yo-yo, she pulled them out of danger, the bus slamming to the street and sliding after them like it was chasing them as they swung. A second later, they swung in through the hole in the wall the boulders had made, and the bus smashed into the wall after them, grinding to a halt in the rubble. Feet hitting the ground, Ladybug supported Chat, who after a moment pulled away. "I'm feline, m'lady. I can run on my own," Chat said, as she gave him a worried look, her arms still reaching towards him. "Well, your puns are still bad, so that's a good sign. We need to get you bandaged up, though," Ladybug answered. Chat grinned at her. "If we finish this battle quickly, there will be no need. Besides, I think it's—" "That's it!" Exposer's frustrated voice cried out from the other side of the wall, breaking Chat off mid-sentence. The bus behind them suddenly vanished, and the wall of rubble crashed to the ground with a terrific rumble. Ladybug gripped Chat's hand and dragged him deeper into the store, dodging shelves as she pulled. It was a toy store, and they had ended up in, and thankfully it had been closed when the bus busted through the wall. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very big store, and the door that they came up against was locked, with a cage blocking the only exit in the place. "Now, where are you two hiding?" Exposer screeched behind them. Chat glanced up at Ladybug, who nodded once. "Take it out, Chat." "Cataclysm!" Chat cried, ready to take out the cage over the door, only to freeze when nothing happened. Ladybug murmured, as Chat glanced down at his free hand, then back up at her. "Cataclysm!" Chat cried once more, following through with the movements and everything, only for it to not work again. I don't understand," Chat cried, releasing his side as he tapped the ring on his finger. "Plag? What's going on?" Plag didn't answer, and Chat looked up at Ladybug, who was surprised and a bit worried. "Plag isn't answering," Chat whispered, and Ladybug flinched. "Tiki?" Ladybug murmured, even as Exposer flew into the air above them, a sudden jetpack on and looking rather smug. There you two are! Stay still so I can crush you and take your miraculous, okay? You guys are starting to bore me, Exposer growled, looking rather miffed. A freaking jetpack? Chad explained, and flinched as pom-poms flew at them. Ladybug's yo-yo busted them before they hit, hissing, "We need to get out of here!" When the rain of pom-poms paused, Ladybug and Chat shared a glance, then split up once more, causing Exposer to fly after Chat when he scooped up a ball and chucked it at her head. Ladybug darted behind one of the shelves, worry surging through her for both Chat and Tiki, since she still hadn't said anything. "Tiki, please answer." "I'm here, Marinette," Tiki squeaked, and Ladybug sighed, clenching a hand over her chest in relief. "Why can't Chat use Cataclysm?" Ladybug asked, getting right to the point as she darted around the corner, making sure that Chat didn't need her any help since Exposer was chasing him. "He got hit with one of those Exposer's pom-pom things. The magic of the akuma's messing with the miraculous magic. Plague is fighting it, but he can't hold out forever," Tiki answered, sounding tired herself. "So basically we need to end this quickly," Ladybug acknowledged, and stepped away from the shelves as she was hiding behind. "Lucky charm!" Light coalesced around the yo-yo in the air, and from it a round spotted mirror formed, falling into her hands a moment later. "A mirror?" Ladybug questioned, and glanced around herself, but the world didn't gray out, nor did it flash in any way. Confused, she hooked the mirror to her waist and ran out to join Chat in the fight against Exposer. Chat was in the space where all the broken wall was, and dodging pom-poms even as he snatched objects from the floor and threw them at Exposer. One such object was a teddy bear, and when the pom-pom struck it, the bear suddenly grew and came alive, letting out a roar. Chat dove behind a sales rack, and Exposer screamed as it charged her, firing a green beam of light from her hand that turned it back into a teddy bear again. It dropped back to the floor, a cute, tuddly stuffed creature, and Exposer froze for a moment as she recovered from the fright. Ladybug took that moment to throw her yo-yo, causing it to wrap around Exposer's waist, trapping her arms to her sides. The only bad thing now was that she had forgotten about the jetpack. Exposer launched herself upwards, yanking Ladybug right off the floor with her. Ladybug screamed as they zoomed about the small store, bashing through hanging mobiles and models. "Ladybug!" Chat yelled as Exposer dropped from the air, tangling Ladybug in a blimp model. It snapped from its strings, ends tangling around Ladybug as Exposer flew off once more, this time flying for the hole in the wall. They soared out into the light, Ladybug's knees banging painfully on the ground as she tried to stop their forward momentum. Skidding forward, Ladybug grabbed hold of a light post, preventing Exposer from taking her any higher. Wrapping her legs around the tight light post, Ladybug hauled back on the yo-yo string with both hands, slowly starting to pull Exposer back down to earth. "Let me go!" Exposer shrieked, twisting the yo-yo string so that one hand finally managed to come free. In the next instant, she ripped a pom-pom off her shoulder and chucked it at Ladybug. Flinching back, Ladybug twisted away, one hand yanking the model blimp up from its place where it sat tangled around her arms. The pom-pom struck it instead of her, and in the next moment, the blimp expanded in size, her yo-yo releasing the akuma as suddenly Ladybug realized she had made a mistake. Her legs were pulled from the lamppost as the blimp continued to grow, its size leaving the street as it slowly started to float upwards. Ladybug twisted and pushed against the rubbery surface. Her arm was now stuck against. When the blimp became real, so had the lines that had tangled around her, and now they had her arm pinned to the balloon. "Milady!" Chat cried, and in the next instant the blimp started to rise rapidly, Chat crashing into her back and grabbing hold of the now thick plastic lines that tied Ladybug to the side of the blimp. "Chat, I can't pull free!" Ladybug cried, yanking her arm against the plastic rope that was now cutting into her painfully. Without another word, he slashed at the cord, cutting through it in seconds with his claws, allowing Ladybug to pull her arm free to her chest, even as she started to slide down the balloon's surface. She didn't slide very far, less than a foot in fact. Her gloved hands had no purchase, but Chat grabbed her before she had slid, and swung her up onto her back before using his claws to scale the side of the blimp as it continued to expand. "Okay, how are you not pulling holes in this thing?" Ladybug demanded, as they came to the top of the blimp. "I have soft paws, my lady," Chad answered unhelpfully, then dodged to the right as a rain of pom-poms was hurled their way. They made it to the top of the balloon in a few seconds, with Chat dodging the aerial attacks masterfully. The top of the blimp was surprisingly flat, so Ladybug leapt off Chat's back as soon as she could, throwing her yo-yo out to smash into Exposer's hands, messing up her aim. Exposer yelped, hauling her hand back and shaking it, even as she soared out of the reach of the two heroes. Landing and bouncing slightly on the rubbery surface, Ladybug darted back towards the center where Chat was heading. It was hard running on the surface of the blimp, and it almost reminded her of one of those bounce house surfaces, since it gave yet bounced back with every step. The best way to run on such a surface was a bouncing lope that took some serious getting used to, and unfortunately, they didn't have the time to get used to it, seeing as though the akuma looked ready to resume her attacks at any second. Chat and Ladybug came together in the center of the blimp, watching Exposer dart around above them, searching for a weak point. "We need to take out her jetpack if we want a chance at winning," Ladybug murmured, even as her Miraculous beeped, reminding her that the dwindling time that they had. "Where did she get a jetpack anyways?" Chat grumbled. "It was probably a toy she picked up. Those pom-poms are obnoxiously useful," Ladybug answered, as she glanced down at his side. Dried blood matted the suit, and fresh blood dotted certain areas along the line's surface. "Is your side okay?" Chat spared a glance down, a grimace crossing his face. "It's really not deep enough to need stitches, although it's bleeding pretty good. The burning's pretty bad, but I can ignore that easy. I think she stabbed me with an oversized nail, though." Ladybug winced in sympathy, then cried, "Move!" as round, colorful balls the size of beach balls flew at them. The balls struck the surface, double bouncing Ladybug, and in the next second, a rainbow-colored pom-pom struck her in the side, before she could even think about blocking. The pom-pom burst upon impact, enveloping her in a rainbow-colored smoke cloud, and Ladybug cursed mentally. "Ma!" Tiki's voice cut off suddenly, as a shiver of what felt like electricity surged over her. "Crap!" Ladybug snarled out loud, before hitting the surface of the balloon, coughing as she accidentally inhaled some of the rainbow smoke. "Ladybug!" Chat shouted, and managing to roll to his feet, she could see him rushing towards her on all fours. Due to his claws, Chat was far better at maneuvering on the blimps, easily dodging large balls and pom-poms that the akuma was tossing his way. A foot from her, he twisted in the air, and smashed a clear ball back at Exposer's face, his staff making her cry out when it collided. It knocked her from the air, and she fell below the curve of the blimp, leaving them in peace for a brief second. "Ladybug, are you okay?" Chat cried, reaching out to grip her arm to help steady her. Ladybug shivered. "I think so. I can't hear Tiki's voice, though. It was cut off. Do I look any different?" Chat took a half a step back. "No, you look the same." "Jeez, don't scare me like that." Ladybug flashed him a weak grin. "Sorry, the balls surprised me and—" "Why didn't you two change?" Exposer shrieked as she soared back above them. "That's so not fair!" Ladybug glared up at her. "Life isn't fair. Get over it." It really was the wrong thing to say, and Exposer snarled as she whipped her hand forward, rainbow-colored smoke appearing in midair as more beach ball-sized spheres flew at them. Chat snatched Ladybug up, throwing them both sideways as the balls struck their surface and bounced. "They're freaking marbles," Chat growled, as one struck near his head and bounced away over the side of the blimp. "Who cares? We need to take out that jammed jetpack," Ladybug answered, rolling back to her feet and sprinting, spinning her yo-yo to deflect another ball. Jetpack, Jack muttered, looking up at Exposer, who was reaching into her pouch once more. I'll hit the jetpack. Cover me. He ran forward on all fours, keeping traction in only a way he could manage. An Exposer followed him, clearly feeling that he was the greater of the threat. Refusing to let her partner down, Ladybug coiled her legs, putting as much power into her next two jumps as she could. To her surprise, she soared far higher than she thought she would, almost coming even with Exposure's height. Ladybug bounced once more on the rubbery surface, gaining the last bit of height she needed, and at the peak of her jump she tossed her yo-yo forward, striking Exposer solidly in the head. The attack stopped cold by the blow, Exposer twisting around and falling several feet in the air as she did. That hurt! She screamed, looking ready to throw something at Ladybug. Chat took her the moment of distraction in stride, and shot up on his staff behind her. In the next second, one of the tanks on Exposer's back exploded, his claws slashing through something important. No! Exposer shrieked as she lost control of the jetpack and spiraled away below the curve of the balloon. Chat fell from the air with a yelp, staff vanishing as green light enveloped him, and Ladybug felt her heart plummet with his body. He had detransformed mid-air, and without another thought, she threw her yo-yo forward, catching his leg before he fell beyond the curve of the balloon. Bouncing to the edge, Ladybug rapidly pulled to the line, feeling to her relief his weight on the other end. Chat! Ladybug called, not wanting to give away his real identity, and a second later he smiled up from his upside-down position. Adrien was a few feet from her, hanging over the edge of the blimp by her yo-yo, and yet, in more ways than one, he still looked like Chat without the mask. Black fuzzy ears adorned his hair, black gloves covered up to his wrists, and she was sure that she could see a tail flicking sideways as she hauled him up against the balloon's surface. Black cargo pants, a green shirt with a black paw print in the center, and a hoodie-like jacket covered him instead of his normal ensemble, but Ladybug didn't have time to contemplate it. In the next instant, her own luck ran out, and pink light filled the space between them as her yo-yo vanished. Adrien yelped as he suddenly dropped, twisting around and missing the edge of the blimp by mere centimeters. Marinette didn't even think about it. She simply launched herself after him, reaching for his hand as she caught up. You idiot! He screamed at her, looking furious, and Marinette wrapped him in a tight hug as they fell, not caring one bit that they were falling to their deaths. Okay, maybe she did care, but there was no way she could have ever lived with herself for dropping Adrien, even if it wasn't her fault to begin with. It was more than just that, though. Some instinct or gut feeling told her that the sky was home. It was the same feeling that she got when she threw her yo-yo up into the air, perfect positioning it for a good swing. Marinette! Fly! Tiki squealed in her ear as the rooftops of Paris grew ever closer. Fly? Marinette whispered questioningly, something within her coming to life as she said that word. Instinct took over, the muscles in her back burning as her new set of wings caught the air and held. A soft humming filled the air as they soared forwards, still falling, but not quite as fast, and rapidly slowing as they neared the rooftops. You have wings? Adrien yelped, eyes wide, and moments later they crashed to a halt on the flat rooftop, where they both lay worn out and very shaken from the fall. They were both panting hard, shaking, and as Marinette looked up at the blimp that was so high in the sky, it looked like a small toy, and she began to giggle almost hysterically. Adrien joined her a moment later, crushing her in a hug that made Marinette's next round of giggles come out as a squeak. Marinette hugged him back just as tight, a hand running through his hair and freezing as she felt the fuzzy warmth of cat ears. Pulling back to seat him properly, Marinette gasped, then grabbed Adrien's head, forcing him to look down as she eyed the black, furry, and very real cat ears that he had coming out of his skull. Princess, "What are you doing?" Adrien asked, as she released his head, only to pull him forward so that she could look over his shoulder for his tail. It twitched on the ground, curling against his body, and Marinette had to resist a very strong urge to tug on it. Adrien, you have real cat ears and a tail," Marinette squeaked. His jaw dropped, and Marinette noted that his canines were longer and far sharper than normal. As Adrien blinked at her, trying to comprehend her words, Marinette also realized that his eyes had changed. His pupils were now elongated, to look more cat-like. Twisting around, Adrien froze as his tail came into view. Then one hand flew up to his head as the other reached for the tail. Adrien was used to his leather tail, that only moved for balance or when his mood was really sketchy. This tail, however, was not leather. It was furry, although not poofy, thank goodness, and it wouldn't hold still either. Twisting around even further, he tried to grab it, and it twitched sideways, avoiding his grasping hand. Marinette laughed at his antics, her hands coming up to prevent him from chasing his tail even further. Realizing what he had been about to do, Adrien blushed, getting a good look at Marinette, his surprise from earlier coming back all at once. "Okay, I may have gotten a tail and cat ears, but I can't believe you have wings!" Adrien cried excitedly, his eyes wide as he tried to crane around to get a better look at them. At his words, Marinette suddenly seemed to realize that he hadn't been the only one to change. A look of shock crossed her face, and she glanced down at her polka-dotted covered hands, then craned her head back as she glanced behind her, eyeing the translucent black wings that poked out from underneath two rounded swaths of fabric. One of them twitched as she focused on it, and she could feel the tremble of the wing all the way down through her spine. A part of her mind felt detached as she thought, "I have wings. My parents are going to freak." And then all at once, reality hit. "Ah!" Marinette shrieked, leaping to her feet, and suddenly her wings opened, vibrating rapidly as she hovered. "Oh, no, 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 no!" she shrieked again, tilting forward, flailing, her wings instantly freezing, and then she fell right onto her face. "Marinette!" Adrien cried, scrambling to her side, eyeing his panicked girlfriend carefully. As much as his outfit had changed, hers was completely altered, and he couldn't help but think it was probably because she was a designer at heart. The only thing left of her normal attire, from what he could tell, was her little pink purse. Her top was red, with black polka dots, and it extended to mid-thigh in the back. Following the curve of her ribcage up to the front, it was slit to a spot just underneath her breasts, with a black skin-tight bodysuit beneath it, covering her the rest of the way down, where it met knee-high red polka-dotted boots. A belt with two pouches hung against her waist, and what looked like her yo-yo was there as well. A round hole in the back of her shirt allowed her wings to move freely, although they appeared to be covered by two oblong red polka-dotted material now that they weren't being used. The top was sleeveless, but red polka-dotted gloves covered her arms up to her elbows. Like him, a mask no longer covered her face, but from the way she looked, it was impossible to not see her as Ladybug. Marinette groaned, a very unhappy, worried sound that made Adrien's heart pound. "Marinette, are you okay?" Adrien asked hesitantly, watching as her wings buzzed slightly when he touched her shoulder. I have wings!" Marinette cried, looking up with him in shock in her eyes, as she slowly sat up, rubbing her nose. Something about her words made Adrien pause with a frown on his face, and slowly he asked, "You didn't realize you had wings?" Marinette shook her head. "Tiki told me to fly when I caught up to you, and it was just instinct, I suppose. Speaking of Tiki..." She looked around her, panicked, discovering that she actually had wings dispersing in favor of finding her Kwame. Adrien felt his ears flatten, a very close sound to a growl passing his lips. Marinette froze at the sound, and he gripped her hand as he stared straight into her bluebell eyes. "You didn't know you had wings, and yet you jumped after me?" he roared all at once, the sheer stupidity of that thought driving him to yell. Marinette flinched, but then her eyes grew steely. "Of course I jumped. I dropped you. We would have figured something out." Adrien cut her off. "You idiot! Stop putting yourself in danger to fix my mistakes. If I'm supposed to be protecting you, not the other way around." "No," Marinette snarled, starting Adrien so that he instantly went silent, his ears pricking in surprise. "That is not the way this works." She shoved a finger into her chest, her glare withering. "We protect each other and catch one another when the other falls," she continued, stabbing him with her finger, leaving him feeling as though she were poking holes in his very spirit. "I will never stop fighting to save you, just as you will never stop fighting to save me. You have no right to ask me to stop." Adrien caught his hand, his chest starting to feel bruised, as he realized that she had retained Ladybug's strength, even though she was still now in civilian form. Well, sort of in civilian form. "But I'm supposed to be your shield, Marinette. If one of us falls, it's gotta be me, because I can't fix everything like you can," Adrien whispered, before she could continue. Marinette sighed as his gaze fell from hers, and his cat ears drooped. The look was adorable on him, but Marinette knew that she couldn't leave this discussion as it was. She hesitated to call it a fight, since they weren't really yelling or lashing out at each other. Silently, Marinette lifted his free hand to her face, forcing his gaze back to hers. "Adrien, Tiki is the one that shields my body, but you're the one that shields my heart. When you go down in a fight—" She broke off for a second, her voice catching as she remembered several of those occasions, and she managed to start up once more. Just know that I can't lose you, Adrien. It's like Plague said a while ago. When you go down, I go all out to make sure that you will wake back up." Adrien felt furious at her words, and yet he was also filled with pride. He had always known that she had his back no matter what, but to hear her say it in a total no-nonsense tone made him swell with love for her. "You have held my heart from the day I met you," Adrien said, making a smile flicker at the corner of her lips. She went to reply, probably with something just as sweet to say back, when Plague groaned and flopped out of his pocket, of his jacket, right into Adrien's lap. "Oh my God, I can't take any more of this gooey sweetness. Tiki, let them have their little tiff, and now they'll work better as a unit. Can we please go now? I'm starving, and that weird akuma magic has me feeling nauseous," Plague whined, looking pitiful as he did so. Tiki flew out of Marinette's purse, letting out a scolding buzz as she did. "Must you ruin every moment they have like this? They just fell in civilian form from a height greater than the Eiffel Tower. If they hadn't been hit by that ridiculous akuma, they both could have died." Marinette started, but the two Kwami looked up at her with a shocking glare, and she went silent. A buzz sound passed between the two Kwami, and their two chosen looked on in awed, quiet confusion, until all at once it broke off. Tiki flew up before Marinette, and for once the cute little Kwami looked deadly serious, an aura of power leaking from her, making Marinette want to cower. "You both need to work on your fighting strategies. Yes, you were lucky, and you always are, Marinette, but the past few times you fought akuma, you two have managed to put yourselves in mortal danger. Our magic can only cover you so far, and these akuma aren't going to get any easier to fight. If anything, things will only become more dangerous," Tiki scolded. Marinette looked shocked, guilty, and severely upset at her words, while Adrien didn't know what to think. He had never heard Tiki use that tone before, and clearly neither had Marinette. In fact, she looked fairly close to tears. Plague grumbled something under his breath, then flew up off of Adrien's lap to hover right in front of his face. Plag's eyes narrowed, and something in Adrien made him sit at attention, some instinct telling him that he was very much in trouble. Plag? Adrien started, then yelped as Plag darted forward, nipping the very tip of his nose, making his eyes instantly water, and his cat ears fall so that they were plastered to his head. It was a silent rebuke, one that if he hadn't gotten hit with the akuma's magic, probably would have had very little effect. Now, though, with the true instincts of a cat surging through him, that rebuke struck far deeper than any words could. A whine fled Adrien's lips, and in the next second, he buried his head into Marinette's lap. "Plag!" Tiki cried, watching Adrien shiver, and Marinette ran a hand over his head, still looking upset by Tiki's words, as well as a touch confused at Adrien's actions. "What? He's my kitten, and usually words don't work on well as they do on your girl. Besides, now that he has the cat half combined thanks to that akuma's magic, my scolding will have a far deeper message than anything I can say," Plag huffed, and at Tiki's glare he rolled his green eyes. "He's my kitten, Tiki. I don't scold you for reprimanding your little bug, and you almost brought her to tears." Tiki sighed, and the two Kwami looked at their chosen, a silent message passing between them, before suddenly they spoke as one. "We don't want to lose either of you." Marinette flinched, and Adrien's head rose enough to look up at the two Kwami from the corner of his eye. Neither one of them knew what to say, so they both settled for mumbled apologies to their respective Kwamis. Some part of them knew the reason why they were being affected so much was because of the akuma magic. But just because you knew the cause of something didn't change the effect that it had over you. In the end, they settled from their flight and subsequent scolding, and they stayed on the roof for a while recouping themselves, and, in Marinette's as well as Adrien's case, adjusting to their new forms. The two Kwami watched on, proud and worried over their chosen, but both the Kwami were feeling exhausted as well. "Do you think you two can make it back to Marinette's house?" Tiki asked, as Adrien bounced off a chimney, swatting playfully at Marinette, who was mastering hovering quite well. Marinette snickered and grabbed his hand as he leapt into the air to swat at her again, and without breaking the hover, swung him forward, so that he could land on the top of the chimney. Adrien hadn't been expecting it, and he landed wrong, his feet missing the edge so that he slammed into the chimney on his stomach. "Ow!" he complained, and Marinette laughed, settling herself back to the rooftop and turning her attention to Tiki. "I think we'll make it just fine, Tiki, but what are we going to do about my parents?" Marinette asked. "I mean, it's quite obvious even without a mask that I'm Ladybug, and Adrien isn't much better off. Especially since I have wings and, Adrien has cat ears, complete with a tail for goodness sakes." Tiki shrugged a little helplessly. "We all need rest, Marinette. You can probably hide into your room until Plag and I recover, then sneak back out to deal with the akuma. Exposure hasn't made another ruckus yet, so we'll have to wait for her to appear again anyways to take her out." Marinette nodded, stroking Adrien's head as he pressed against her on all fours. She smiled at the softness of his hair and marveled at the warm fuzziness his ears had as she rubbed them. The ears she was rubbing twitched in her fingers, and Adrien sighed, leaning against her harder, almost knocking her over. "I would say we could hide at my place, but it still wouldn't explain how we got out of your room in the first place," Adrien murmured, even as a purr started to rumble out of him from her pets. "Who cares about that? I'm hungry, and someone promised me cheese bread for lunch," Plag complained, and at his words, Marinette's eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh, lunch! My mom's gonna come and get us for lunch, and we're not in my room!" Marinette spazzed suddenly, and Adrien understood why. "We have to get back to your house. Come on, let's go," Adrien said, and started to run, leaping over to the next rooftop as Plag grabbed hold of the hoodie of his jacket. Tiki dove into Marinette's purse, and she was off like a shot, sprinting and jumping aside Adrien as they raced back to her room. Several times, Marinette had to fly, grabbing hold of Adrien's hands to clear jumps that they usually needed their equipment for. Adrien loved the sensation of flying each and every time, and from the look on Marinette's face, she seemed to be enjoying it as well. Finally, they reached her balcony, and she dropped into from a hover right through her trapdoor, feet hitting the discarded bag of cat toys on her bed and scattering them across her sheets. Adrien dropped down beside her, grinning because they had made it in time. The movie was still playing on the computer, and her door was still closed. In the next instant, however, a knock sounded on the door below them, and Marinette got a very panicked look in her eyes. Yeah?" she squeaked, jumping over the edge of the bed and hovering in the air, as Adrien dropped to his belly on her bed. "Marinette, are you two okay?" her mom called, the door starting to rise. Yes," Marinette shouted, dropping to the floor and landing slightly on the door, to snap it closed before Sabine could open it up. Don't come in. I was showing Adrien ideas for some presents," she lied, swiftly leaping towards her closet, as she riffled through some of her costumes and pulled out a cloak that she swiftly wrapped around her. "Oh, is that why you two have been so quiet up here?" Sabine asked curiously through the closed door. "Yep," Marinette yelled back, scrambling back to her door in case her mom decided to try and peek. A yowl froze her mid-step as she made it through the center of her room. "Marinette, what was that?" Sabine questioned, sounding concerned as another yowl echoed. Marinette was mortified, and as a cat toy ball flew over the edge of the bed, she realized her mistake. "It's the movie! I'll shut it up right now!" Marinette called, emphasizing several words in an attempt to get Adrien to stop making noise. "No! Mine!" Adrien's voice yelled over the sound of the film, and in the next instant Plagg flew over the edge of the bed, Adrien leaping after him in pursuit of what looked like a chunky mouse toy. Adrien caught the end of it as it fell, the toy shredding underneath his claws, and the thing burst, sending tiny minty leaf flakes everywhere. "Adrien!" Marinette shrieked as suddenly he landed on her, knocking her to the ground with a huge thump. "Marinette!" Sabine yelled worriedly as she flung Marinette's door wide open. Tiki Black grabbed Plagg, who was now buried halfway into the toy, still floating a few feet from the kids off the ground, not seeing Sabine as she froze in the doorway. "I told you to stop teasing him!" Tiki squealed, knocking the toy off his head, and Plagg simply giggled, snuggling against her midair as he purred. Adrien was doing much the same thing to Marinette, as Tiki looked down and realized that Marinette's mother had come fully into the room, staring at the scene before her with shock written all over her face. "What on earth?" she asked, staring at the mess before her. Tiki, at a loss, did the only thing she could think of. Meow?" she uttered, and Marinette made a choking sound before falling back flat to the floor, hands over her face. To the Kwame's surprise, Sabine threw her head back and laughed. They were so busted, it wasn't even funny, and all Sabine could do was laugh at the distraught expression covering her daughter's face, as the two fairy creatures all at once dove for cover. Well, the red one did at least. The cat-shaped one slowly sank to the floor, and once there, began to roll around in some of the leaf flakes, much like Adrien was doing. Adrien didn't seem concerned at all, purring and rubbing his face into the floor and all over Marinette. "Mom," Marinette all but whimpered, not knowing what to say or do. Over her time as a ladybug, Marinette had come up with numerous scenarios in her head, where her parents, or at least her mom, figured out that she was Ladybug. Most of them were akuma fights gone bad, or having to use her powers in front of them for whatever reason. Never in a million years did she think that she would be ousted like this, with a cat-eared Adrien snuggled up to her purring up a storm, and with her adorable red bug-style Kwame meowing of all things before diving into a hiding. It hadn't helped her to meow the last time she'd been caught. Why in the world had Tiki done it again? With the stress of the day affecting her, Marinette could only groan, giving up entirely as she simply let Adrien's purr vibrate through her. Marinette, sweetheart, I think we need to have a talk, Sabine said gently, coming fully into Marinette's room. She put out a hand and after a moment, Marinette sighed, reaching up to grasp it. As Sabine started to pull Marinette to her feet, Adrien grumbled and grabbed his arms around her waist, keeping her trapped to the floor in a sitting position. What's wrong with him? Sabine asked, and Marinette groaned once more as she got a good look at one of the leaves on the ground. It's catnip. I had hoped it wouldn't affect him, Marinette answered, letting go of her mom's hand to poke at Adrien's cat ears, which twitched. Let go of me, you silly kitten. We have some explaining to do, and I am not doing it alone. Especially since this is your fault for pouncing on me, Marinette hissed, as Sabine hid a smile and watched her daughter poke and prod at him when he refused to let go. Suddenly, Adrien yelped as he poked his side, and only belatedly did Marinette remember the wound that he had there. It was a blessing in disguise, however, because the influx of pain seemed to shake him slightly free of the effects the catnip had over him. Sorry, Adrien, I forgot about your wound. You need to get up, though, Marinette said, swiping at his hair so she could look him in the eyes. He's hurt? Sabine cried, and Marinette glanced up at her mom, who looked alarmed. It's just a scratch. A deep scratch? Marinette answered finally, and Sabine turned away, looking down the stairwell. Tom, come up here. I need you to carry Adrien to the bathroom, Sabine called, and after a moment Tom pounded up the stairway, only to freeze as he took in the sight before him. Adrien had managed to sit up with Marinette's help, and Tom could see that he had cat ears and what looked like a cat tail twitching on the floor beside him. The cloak Marinette had thrown on was falling off her shoulder completely, revealing a red polka-dotted outfit, and all at once, everything clicked. Oh, well, this explains a lot, Tom said, scooping Adrien up off the floor before he could protest. Let's get you patched up. I think we can have the full story over lunch. It took a few minutes for Adrien to come out of his happy catnip doze, and it was really only after Marinette threatened to soak him with cold water that he really started paying attention. They patched up his side, which hadn't bled on his shirt, thankfully, and although Sabine acted like she was fine, Marinette could see the concern on her face when they saw the other scars on his chest and back. Most of them were little thin slivers or lines, although the ones he had gotten from Ironclaw were still a little puffy and raw-looking. Adrien didn't say anything, but he knew from the look in Marinette's eyes that she recognized every single scar, and he had a feeling that she had her share of scars as well. Finally, though, they were finished, and as one they were shepherded into the kitchen. Okay, kids, start talking, Sabine said, as she got out lunch and Tom loaded up 4 plates. Marinette and Adrien glanced at each other, unsure of where to begin. Adrien felt strangely hungover, like he had taken cold medicine or something, and Marinette stood as he laid his head down on the counter. I'll be right back, Marinette said, and darted up her stairs. When she entered her room, Marinette called for Tiki, who appeared after a moment over the top of her bed. Coming, Marinette, she called, then disappeared for a brief moment. When she flew over the bed railing once more, she carried a limp plague in her paws. I'm gonna need your help explaining things, Marinette said softly, cupping her hands so that the Kwame could land in them. Tiki nodded. I'm sorry about hiding and meowing. I was just caught off guard. Marinette giggled and pressed a gentle kiss to the Kwame's forehead. It's okay, Tiki. At least you weren't high on catnip. Tiki giggled as well, and leaving a snoring plague in her hands, she flew up to sit on Marinette's shoulder. Well, I guess this means I don't have to hide in your house anymore, and I can eat all the cookies I want. Marinette nodded at Tiki's words, wondering how her parents were going to act from now on. They knew that she was Ladybug, and Marinette knew that they both watched the feeds from the Akuma fights every time that they were on TV. Would they be mad and try to stop her now that she knew who she was? Tiki, as if sensing her reservations, patted her cheek gently. It's gonna be okay, Marinette. Out of everyone I've ever known to be discovered by their parents, yours have reacted the best to this sort of news. I'll be right there next to you. Even if they don't approve, you're the one who decides to get to be Ladybug or not. Marinette sighed, but deep down she knew that it would never come to that. Still, it made her feel better to have Tiki's slight weight resting on her shoulder as she strode back into the kitchen. Both of her parents looked up as she walked back in, and even Adrien turned to look at her, a sleepy smile crossing his lips as he recognized the look on her face. It was her ladybug look, the one that spelled trouble for whatever akuma they were facing, and the one that she wore when there was a job to be done. Silently, he slipped from his stool and to her side, lifting a limp, dozy Plag from her palm as he crouched at her feet, poking Plag mercilessly in an attempt to wake him up. Mama, Papa, there's something I need to tell you, and I'm sorry to have waited so long. Marinette took a deep breath, her free hand tangling in Adrien's hair, as he pressed against her, giving her the strength she needed. She had to remind herself again that her parents already knew, and that this, in truth, was just a formality. I'm Ladybug, and this is Tiki, the one who enables me to become Ladybug. Tiki flew off her shoulder briefly and gave a shy wave. Sorry to have remained hidden from you for so long, but it was necessary. Marinette was slightly surprised that Tiki had spoken, and she paused for a second, trying to think of what else to say. With a chuckle, Adrien stood, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek, causing her to blush. Turning to her parents, he offered a small, confident smile, wanting to appear worthy enough to stand by their daughter's side. I apologize for not telling you sooner as well. I'm Chat Noir, and my Kwame is Plag, who can be affected by catnip and never told me. He held Plag up by the scruff of his neck, showing them what he was talking about. Plag gave a loud yawn and stretched as he held him up, only to blink sleepily at Adrien as he lowered him back to his palm. I'm hungry, Plag complained, and Adrien sighed even as Marinette giggled. The two teens waited for the verdict, standing side by side and watching the adults as they shared a look. As one, the two adults came around the side of the counter, Sabine going to stand in front of Adrien, as Tom went to stand before Marinette. We are so proud of you both, they said at the exact same time, and as one moved forward to wrap the two teens in a four-way hug. Adrien felt himself go stiff for a brief second. Then, their words soaking up all the doubts and fears that he had in him, before flushing him with a sense of joy and peace. Very few people ever said that they were proud of him, and most of the time, those words came from Marinette in one form or another. Coming from her parents, those words were like precious jewels, and he felt his throat go tight with emotion. Oh, Mama, Papa, thank you. I love you guys so much, Marinette whispered beside him, and Adrien, after a moment, managed to croak out, Ditto, through a lump in his throat. The massive hug lasted a moment longer before they finally pulled back. Well then, now that the introductions are over, how about we get something to eat? And here's some explanation on how all this happened, Sabine said, her voice cheerful. Marinette and Adrien nodded, walking back to their stools, and once they sat down with their meals, they began to speak. It actually took them several minutes to really get started, and as they finished their meal, they realized that they were nowhere near being finished with their actual tale. As Tom started to ask another round of questions, Marinette's phone vibrated, and when she turned it on, she gasped. Crap! Adrien, the exposer popped back up, Marinette cried, jolting out of her seat so fast that she tripped. Immediately, her wings flew open, and instead of hitting the ground, she hovered. I'm assuming that's new, Sabine said, seeing the surprised look on her daughter's face. Huh? Marinette questioned, immediately losing control over her wings, and for the second time that day, she face-planted. Adrien snickered. sliding off his stool and helped Marinette sit up as she rubbed her stinging nose. "Don't make me get out the spray bottle, kitten," Marinette growled, and Adrien felt a shiver of apprehension run through him. No time for that, milady. We have an akuma to catch," Adrien stuttered, giving her a sheepish grin as he helped her to her feet. Sabine sighed in contentment, leaning into Tom as she watched the two teens interact. They were so darn cute, and now that the mystery of the magic boyfriend had been solved, Sabine knew that things would only get better from here on out. As a parent, she and Tom were going to have to set some new ground rules, of course, but from what she could see, her daughter and Adrien were made for each other. "We will be back, okay, Mama? Papa?" Marinette said, her voice sounding almost questioning. "Can we see you two transform?" Sabine asked, figuring that was as good of an answer as any. Marinette grinned wildly as Adrien chuckled. "Shall we, milady?" Adrien asked, and Marinette nodded, and at the same time the two of them called out their catchphrases. "Tiki, spots on," Marinette called with a grin, as Adrien answered with, "Plag, claws out." In the next instant, things went horribly awry. As their Kwami started to enter their Miraculous, a feeling like an electrical current surged through them both. Rainbow-colored dust rose around them, and the two Kwami were suddenly, forcefully rejected. The recoil was strong enough that the two teens ended up sprawled out on the floor, groaning and trying to figure out what had just occurred. "Kids, are you okay?" Tom called, as Sabine and him rushed to their sides to help them up. "That is not how this usually goes down," Marinette answered with a groan, as her father pulled her up into a sitting position. "Tiki, what happened?" Tiki fluttered up off the floor and flew to the few feet to fall into Marinette's cupped palms. "I'm afraid the akuma's magic has bonded with you, and because you can't turn into Ladybug as Paris knows you. The same goes for you, Adrien," Tiki answered, slowly watching as Plag flew over to land on Adrien's head. "Wait, so I can't turn into Ladybug?" Marinette cried, her wings twitching. "And I can't become Chat Noir?" Adrien echoed. The two Kwami eyed their charges a little curiously. "You two are already transformed. Now all you need is the masks," they answered together. Marinette felt her jaw drop. "You want us to go out and fight an akuma like this?" Plag snickered. "Unless you want to go to school and live out the rest of your life like that, you don't have much of a choice." As much as I hate to agree with Plag, he's right, Marinette. We kind of already look like our alter egos, and I'm sure you have some masks lying around somewhere. Once we have a mask on, no one should be able to tell the difference," Adrien said, scooting closer, recognizing the panic in her eyes. But I... Marinette started, and Tiki broke in, her eyes wide and piercing. "You must defeat the akuma to return to your own states back to normal. Once you do that, we can combine and properly cleanse the akuma. I've told you numerous times that you were chosen as Ladybug because that's who you are down to your core. This akuma has proven that," Tiki stated, her little paws patting Marinette's hands. Marinette's jaw worked, opening and closing silently, as no words came out. Warmth surged through her, and she knew that she was blushing, but she was also filling with a kind of pride as she realized her Kwamis was right. Marinette had always been unsure of herself. Unfortunately, being picked on for years tended to do that to a person. Since meeting Isla and becoming Ladybug, though, she had been regaining her confidence slowly but surely. Now, sitting in her kitchen with her parents to either side of her, Tiki encouraging her, and Adrien staring at her with absolute devotion, it all finally clicked. She was strong, she was brave, selfless, and she was Ladybug. A smile spread across Marinette's face as she looked into her Kwami's eyes, finally understanding. "Thank you, Tiki," Marinette whispered, and Tiki beamed, sensing the change within her chosen. Adrien was still gazing at them, and he smiled as his eyes met hers. There was a change in the both of them, she noticed, and Marinette realized that Tiki's words had reached him too. I have 2 masks in my room. It'll just take a few minutes to alter them so we can use them, Marinette said, and Adrien nodded. Marinette's parents helped the 2 teens up off the floor and pulled them into a hug once more before they could escape. If you 2 are going out like this, just wait one moment before leaving. I have something you can both use, Sabine said, and pulled Tom towards their room. Adrien shot Marinette a questioning glance, and she just shrugged. I don't know, but we can wait for them in my room while I do the mass. They ran up the stairs, and Marinette found the 2 masks she wanted. Ironically, she was actually making a ladybug costume for Isla as a joke, and she had also started on a Chat No Arm costume for Nino. The masks for the 2 costumes were practically complete, and they only needed a few finishing touches so that they could be secured around their heads. As she was doing that, Adrien pulled up her computer and followed the exposer's movements as best as he could. Done! Marinette cried a few minutes later, and he was at her side in an instant, grinning like a fool when she slipped the mask on him, checking for any issues. Can you see okay? It doesn't mess up your vision anywhere, right? Adrien shook his head, then helped her slide her own mask on. Okay, we have the masks and the kwami and, princess? I just realized I don't have any other weapons other than my claws. Marinette froze, her eyes wide, and reached onto her side where her yo-yo usually sat. The Lucky Charm mirror was there, but no yo-yo, and she pulled it off to look at it again. Adrien groaned when he realized it was a mirror. It's a mirror? I thought it was your yo-yo. Great, so neither of us have weapons now, Adrien bemoaned. That's why I asked you 2 to wait, Sabine said, emerging into Marinette's room carrying several items. Tom followed with a staff in hand. We only have 1 staff, and I don't know if this stuff will help, but I found all these as well. She dumped the items in her hands onto Marinette's couch, and Adrien chuckled. There was a can of silly string, some pepper spray, a rope with a weight on the end, and some other random odds and ends that Marinette couldn't really think of any use for in battle. I call the silly string, Adrien cried with a grin. Marinette swatted his hand, making him recoil with a yelp. What in the world would you use silly string for in a battle? A distraction, Adrien answered, his ears twitching as his other hand grabbed the can before she could stop him. Marinette rolled her eyes as she pocketed the pepper spray and hooked the rope to her belt. Fine, you're taking the staff as well then. Adrien paused and looked up at Marinette's mom. But then you won't have a weapon, Marinette. No matter what, one of us isn't going to have a weapon. You're better at using a staff, though. Besides, depending on what Exposer is doing, we can always switch the staff between us. While we run, I'll need my hands free anyways. Adrien clearly didn't like the idea, but he didn't argue, and he grabbed a few other little items from the pile to put into his pockets before he turned to take the staff from Tom. You 2 be careful out there, he said, giving Adrien and Marinette a stern look as he handed the weapon over. Sabine didn't bother with words and simply pulled Adrien into another hug. He blushed, and once she released him, Adrien leapt straight up onto Marinette's bed to open up the hatch. We'll be back really soon, and then we can make cookies or something, Marinette said, flashing a smile at her parents to ease their minds, since she could see the worried looks in their eyes. They nodded as one, and Marinette flew up to the window, closing her wings briefly as she climbed out. Where to, Chat? Marinette asked, and Adrien grinned. Downtown. Can we fly, or will that wear you out? Marinette nodded. I should be fine. Hold on to the staff in the center, and we'll see how it works. She flew up into the air, and Adrien raised the staff up, holding onto it in the center. Marinette grabbed the staff to either end of his hands and flew up a little, testing the weight and her balance. To her surprise, it was actually easy, and in truth, it didn't feel like she was carrying a whole other person. Okay, hold on tight, Marinette commanded, and surged forward as Adrien let out a delighted whoop. It felt fantastic to fly. and Marinette wished that her normal costume gave her this ability every day. Swinging on a yo-yo string was epic and a ton of fun, but it held nothing on true flight. Angling them towards the downtown, Adrien pointed her in the right direction to go, since as they got closer, he could hear the ruckus the akuma was causing. They zoomed up over the peak of a building, and suddenly they had a front row seat to Exposer's mischief. She had gotten her hands on yet another jetpack, and her back was to them as she pegged everything and anything in the street below. "Throw me!" Adrien called, and Marinette darted towards Exposer. There was no time to demand an explanation, so biting her lip, Marinette did as he asked, spinning around to build up some extra momentum and releasing him at just the right moment. He surged from her grasp, raising the staff as he came down upon Exposer. Exposer didn't even have a chance to see him coming, as Adrien slammed the staff home into the jetpack, busting it before he leapt off it once more. Marinette swooped in and caught the raised staff, before he could fall too far, while Exposer let out a shriek as she fell into an uncontrolled spiral towards the ground. Somehow, Exposer managed to shuck the jetpack off, and in an explosion of rainbow-colored smoke, what looked like an oversized marshmallow, it came out of nowhere in the air, enveloping Exposer before she struck the hard ground. "Is that a packing peanut?" Marinette queried, as she flew down towards the ground. "Who knows, my lady? That bag of hers is probably packed with all kinds of things," Adrien answered, with a chuckle. Marinette glared. "Don't make me drop you, chat." Adrien grinned up at her and did a pull-up to press a swift kiss to her lips. Startled, Marinette did drop him, but thankfully they were only a few feet from the ground. Adrien laughed as he landed on his feet, and Marinette growled as she settled down on the ground next to him. "Oh my gosh, that was amazing!" a voice squealed from off to the side, and the superhero duo spun, ready to fight. Isla stepped out of an alleyway, and the two heroes groaned. Isla had been hit by Exposer at some point, and now she was dressed in a fashion that reminded them strongly of when she was Lady Wi-Fi. She didn't have a mask on, but she did have several high-tech looking balls that were clearly some kind of camera. "What are you doing here, Isla?" Marinette demanded, flinching back as one of the cameras zoomed over to them. "Duh! Getting my scoop. I've already been hit by her powers, and unlike Chloe, I'm like a super reporter on the inside. These little cameras are epic," Isla answered, a wide grin plastered across her face. "But enough about me. What happened to you two? I mean, Ladybug, you have wings, and Chat Noir, is that a real cattail?" Marinette groaned. "Isla, this is not the time." "You will pay for breaking my jetpack again!" Exposer shrieked from behind them, and Adrien darted in front of Ladybug as a beam of light shot from Exposer's hands. Adrien yelped as the beam hit him, and his cat characteristics instantly vanished. Unbalanced by the sudden change, he stumbled, and Marinette caught him, turning her body so that she blocked the view of the camera that was pointed their way. Adrien was back to normal, and the only thing protecting his identity at the moment was a black mask that covered his face. "So my powers did work on you!" Exposer yelled, sounding triumphant. "I can't believe you guys actually came back to fight without your Miraculous!" "We will always return to fight to protect Paris, no matter what form we take," Marinette snarled, as she glared up at Exposer. Then in a softer voice she whispered, "Are you okay?" Adrien's head nodded against her, and he turned in her arms. "I'm fine. That felt really weird, but if I'm back to normal, then I can transform." "Better hurry. I think I made her mad," Marinette answered, not liking the look on Exposer's face just before she was enveloped by rainbow-colored smoke. "Claws out, Plag," Adrien hissed, and with a whoop, Plag vanished into his ring. Marinette closed her eyes as the flash of green light enveloped them, and then yelped as Adrien threw them both sideways through flames scorching the place where they had just been. Her wings opened instinctively, and she shot forward with Chat clinging to her, as the flames followed them hungrily. Taking a sharp turn into an alley, Marinette slowed, and Chat let go, dropping to the ground as she looked himself over. "It worked!" he cried. Then he threw his arms around Marinette, dancing her around in a quick circle. "That's not fair!" Exposer screamed from out in the street, and Chat moved back to the corner to peer out. Flames shot past, and he yanked his head back just in time to avoid a scorched nose, although it singed his hair a little bit. Marinette rolled her eyes. "You're going to get your nose burned off, frozen, or cut off one of these days doing that." Chat snickered and rubbed his nose as he made his way back to his side. "Since you still have the wings, you want to go high and I'll go low?" "I don't think there's any other choice, although—" Marinette paused for a second thinking, and then pulled out the can of pepper spray. "Give me the silly string, and you take the pepper spray." Chat cocked an eyebrow at her. "Do you have a plan?" Marinette nodded. "Silly string will explode when exposed to heat and flames. When that happens, you dart in and spray her with the pepper spray. Once she's blind, she should be far easier to deal with." Chat grinned wide a mischievous grin that made Marinette's heart flutter. "That's brilliant, my lady. It's as good as done," he said, reaching into his pocket of his suit, and to Marinette's surprise, he pulled out his can of silly string. "I really need a magic pocket in my suit," Marinette grumbled, handing over the pepper spray as she took the silly string. "That could probably be arranged," Tiki squeaked from her shoulder, and Marinette smiled at her qualmy. "Awesome, Tiki. Now hold on tight, because I'm probably going to be flying a little crazy." Tiki nodded and darted into her pigtails as Marinette opened her wings once more. Before she could take off, Chat grabbed her hand. "Please, be careful. If she hits you midair with her de-transforming beam, you could get hurt," Chat murmured, his bright green eyes wide and pleading. Marinette pressed a hand to his cheek. "I will, Kitty. Besides, even if I fall, I know you'll always catch me." Chat nodded and let her go once more, allowing Marinette to shoot up out of the alley. Marinette spiraled into the air, relishing the feeling before turning over to find Exposer. Almost immediately, she spotted her, and Marinette dove for Exposer, yelling out, "It doesn't seem like your powers have worked so well on us. All you did was make us stronger." Exposer let out a shriek of combined surprise and rage, then pointed her device at her in her hands. Fire surged from the tip of the device, and Marinette twisted midair, the fire missing her by inches. Zipping forward, Marinette dropped lower still, keeping an eye out for Chat as he darted from the alleyway's entrance. "I'm gonna burn you to a crisp," Exposer squealed, shooting another wall of flames at her. Lobbing the can of silly string into the heart of the flames, Marinette banked as heat made her skin uncomfortably warm. A boom echoed a moment later, and Exposer shrieked, throwing the fire gun away from her body, as the can of exploded silly string rained down fire all around her. A couple pieces landed on her, and she yelped at the contact, swiftly patting out her pom-poms. Chat flew over Carr a moment later, staff in hand, as he took a swing at Exposer's legs. The strike landed, sweeping her legs right out from underneath her, and Chat moved forward, ready to follow through. Marinette flipped around to keep a better eye on the battle below them, when a puff of smoke enveloped Exposer's hands. Chat couldn't see what she had done, but Marinette could. It had been a toy sword before, one that Exposer had pulled from her bag as she fell, but on contact with the pom-poms, it suddenly became very real, very sharp, and very dangerous. "Chat, back!" Marinette yelled as Exposer thrust forward. Chat reacted instantly, leaping to the top of his staff as the sword slashed at the place where he had been a moment before. The sword clanged harshly on his staff, and Exposer was on her feet in a second, aiming higher with her second thrust. Chat flipped back off his staff, avoiding the blow with ease, then swung the staff up to parry a clumsy downward strike. The sword slid off the staff with a screech of metal, and at the end of the staff cracked into Exposer's chin, causing her to stumble back a few steps. "That's a nasty little habit you have there, with that sneak attack through the smoke. My lady will be furious with me if I let you cut me again. Might we try a safer object to fight with?" Chat asked as he lazily parried her next blow. Exposer gave a wordless shout of rage as he total nonchalance, and tried her absolute best to skewer Chat. He dodged with a laugh, and Marinette hovered, watching for an opening as she fingered the length of rope at her side. Silently, she told herself not to worry. Chat was a master at fencing. Even if she could tell that Exposer had no idea what she was doing when it came to swinging a sword. The problem was that even though Exposer had no idea how to fight with a sword, she was still far stronger than the average person, and one lucky hit was all she needed. Exposer slashed down again, and Chat caught the sword on his staff, bracing against the straining sword with both hands. "You don't seem to be improving at this, so how about we call it quits and try something different?" Chat asked, a sly grin on his face. "An excellent idea. Let's see what I've got," Exposer panted with a grin of her own, then reached into her bag once more. Chat's eyes flicked up to Marinette, and she dove, throwing the weighted end of the rope in her hand at the hand going into the Exposer's bag. Throwing a weighted rope and throwing a yo-yo were unfortunately two different things, and Marinette only realized it after the weight had left her hand. She missed, and the weight of the end of the rope struck Exposer in the back instead of her hand, causing her to stumble forward a step with a gasp. With the pressure on the staff released, Chat dropped one hand, the other flinging the sword sideways with a shriek of metal scraping metal. In the next instant, Exposer screamed out loud as Chat leapt back, the pepper spray in hand. Dropping the sword, Exposer's hand flew to her face as she screamed again and again, one hand starting to fling random objects with poofs of smoke and rainbows everywhere. Chat ducked a bowling ball, dodged a playing card, and then leapt straight up into the air, bouncing off a chuck car to gain more height with a hand outstretched. Marinette swooped down, caught him, and then swung away as a beam of green light flashed past them. "What did you do to me?" Exposer screamed, her eyes slits as she tried to fire at them through tear-filled puffy eyes. "Pepper spray!" Chat called gleefully, and Marinette swung to the side to avoid what looked like an oversized quarter. Exposer shrieked in fury and pain, and Marinette shook him. "Not helping!" she snarled, and braked suddenly as a beam of green light flashed past them again. She went higher, trying to avoid the light, and Chat reached up, grabbing the mirror at her waist, and brought it up as a beam of green light shot towards them once more. "Wait!" Marinette yelped, but it was already too late. The beam of light reflected off the mirror, and in a moment, it struck Exposer. Rainbow poofed into a massive cloud, and then suddenly they were in falling. "Tiki, spots on!" Marinette cried, feeling the tingle of magic as she snatched up and threw her yo-yo at the closest thing she locked eyes on. It was a chimney, and as the string went taut, it swung them up, Chat's toes just barely tapping the ground before they were airborne once more. Ladybug landed on her feet at the edge of the roof, but Chat wasn't so lucky with his footing. Thankfully, he still had a grip on Ladybug's hand as she hauled him up over the edge. "I'm guessing I got her," Chat said, feeling sheepish. Ladybug chuckled. "This is why I make the plans, kitten. It was a good idea, though." The smoke down below dissipated, and Chat handed her mirror back as the two of them dropped down to street level, approaching a still screaming Exposer. Except this Exposer didn't look like Exposer anymore. "Lark?" Ladybug asked, studying the still screeching, puffy-eyed girl. "No! I'm the Exposer, and I'm gonna get you for this!" she screamed, charging right at them. Ladybug rolled her eyes and tossed her yo-yo out so that it tangled her legs in her arms, trapping them at her sides. Exposer lurched forward and Chat caught her before she hit the ground by the yo-yo string on her back. "What did you do to me?" Exposer screamed again as she tried and failed to get out of the yo-yo. You kinda did it to yourself, actually," Chat answered as he pulled the akumified object from her hair. "No!" Exposer screamed again, and Chat laid her down on the ground before joining Ladybug a few feet away. How about we go up under the roof where it's a bit quieter? Chat asked, and Ladybug nodded. Slipping her free arm around his shoulders, Chat wrapped his arm about her waist, and then used his staff to launch himself up onto the roof. Ladybug recalled her yo-yo string, then turned to Chat with a nod. Come on out, you nasty bug, Ladybug called, and Chat shredded the band beneath his claws. The butterfly wiggled out, and Ladybug snatched it from the air, catching her yo-yo easily in her grip. Chat moved forward. Can I? He asked, wiggling a little in happiness as she held the yo-yo out to him with a grin. He pressed a gentle claw to the surface, and it opened, releasing the white butterfly within. Bye-bye, little butterfly, they called together, then laughed. Hand dropping to her side, Ladybug pulled the mirror out and tossed it high into the air. Miraculous cleanse! Light exploded from the object and spiraled around the two of them briefly, before shooting off through the city to fix everything Exposer had done. After a moment of silence, Ladybug held out a fist, and Chat grinned. For once, they weren't running low on time, unconscious, or otherwise injured after an akuma battle. Pound it! They both cried, their fists locking together with a laugh. Aww! I liked my inner reporter, a voice cried, and Ladybug glanced over the roof to see Iris holding out her phone, recording and pouting. Since you guys are still here, do you mind if I get a scoop? Ladybug sighed. For once, she really didn't feel like playing 20 questions with Isla. After all, she still had a talk with her parents to look forward to. Sorry, Miss Reporter, but we have previous engagements we must attend to. Maybe next time, though, Chat answered, knowing that Ladybug had a hard time refusing Marinette in general. Before Isla could yell anything out, the duo was heading out for Marinette's house, since they both know her parents would be waiting. They tumbled into her room, dropping their transformations as they bounced to the bed. Adrien nearly went over the edge as the staff sprang back into being and tripped him up, but Marinette grabbed him with a giggle, managing to keep him on the bed. You ready? Marinette asked softly, slipping the mask she had worn back off over her face, and Adrien nodded. Time to face the music, I suppose, Adrien answered, removing his mask as well and looking a touch nervous as he did. With a smile, she took his mask and tossed them both down off her bed, before taking a deep breath. Marinette understood how she felt. She was nervous too, but so far her parents had taken everything in stride, so one could always hope. Mama, Papa, we're home, Marinette cried, leaping down her ladder with Adrien hot on her heels. Together, they went through her trapdoor, and they found both of their parents sitting there waiting on the couch for them. Taking in their normal grinning faces, Sabine sighed in relief. I take it the battle went well then, Sabine asked gently. Yep, and I'm all healed, so no need to worry, Adrien answered, patting his side as Marinette nodded. Good, Sabine said, the relief obvious on her face. You kids need to sit down, then, because we have some things to discuss. Marinette and Adrien shared a look that held worry as well as a multitude of other emotions. You're not gonna tell my father, are you? Adrien asked, the fear evident on his face. Sabine frowned, not liking the fact that Adrien seemed to fear the idea of his father finding out. We won't tell your father, Adrien. That's something that you need to do on your own when you feel that the time is right. Adrien sighed in relief, then took Marinette's hand, walking over to the other couch across from her parents. Marinette cuddled close once they sat down, and the two Kwame landed on their chosen's laps, ready to answer any questions if asked. So, how much trouble are we in? Marinette finally asked, and to her surprise, her father was the one to start laughing. In the end, a whole new set of ground rules were created for the Dupain Chang household. Curfew was 2 a.m., unless they were finding an akuma or couldn't make it home. However, a warning was required if curfew wasn't about to be made for any reason. Adrien was allowed to sleep over any time. However, he had to let Marinette's parents know that he was there, even if he needed to wake them up to do so. To Adrien's shock, they even gave him a key, and Sabine's comment about him coming home like a normal human being made him tear up for a minute. They didn't put restrictions on them, which shocked Adrien, but Marinette wasn't really all that surprised. Her parents were really easygoing people, and they knew that she wouldn't abuse their trust in her. Besides, her mom had apparently known that Chat had been sleeping in the bed with her for a few weeks now, and hadn't said anything in favor of waiting to see what was really going on. The only thing Tom had to say about it was that he was too young to be a grandfather. That comment had mortified both Adrien and Marinette, and they both spluttered out, "It's not like that!" Eventually, Adrien needed to return home, if only for a little while, and get lectured, since he hadn't showed up for his photo shoot. Sabine stopped him on the way out and asked him if he would be returning that night to join them for a late-night movie marathon, and Adrien had enthusiastically agreed. Thankfully, Adrien was able to cite the akuma attack for not being able to show up, and he was let off with a stern lecture and confinement to his room for the rest of the day. Once he was sent to his room, Adrien waited for nightfall, then slipped out of his room as Chat. Arriving at Marinette's house, he dropped his transformation in a nearby alley and walked to the front door. It was open, and nervously he slipped in through the door. It felt weird walking into the house, although he had a key now, so he called out a greeting, trying to figure out where everyone was. Marinette stuck her head around the wall away in a minute and waved at him. "Come on up," she called. He did, and found to his delight warm cookies, milk, and a mess of pillows, complete with blankets on the floor. Marinette was in her PJs already, and she grinned at the ecstatic look on his face. "You have some PJs upstairs if you want to get changed," Marinette chuckled. Adrien dodged forward to give her a peck on the cheek, then launched him up her stairs, eager to get comfy on the pillows and blankets layering the living room floor. He was back in a minute, remembering to greet her parents this time, before snuggling against Marinette with a purr. Neither of them lasted long, and somewhere in the middle of the first movie, they both passed out, exhausted from the long day. Marinette's parents eyed the two kids before them with a sigh. Adrien was curled up around Marinette, their legs tangled and her nose pressed into the soft cotton shirt on his chest. A purr rumbled from Adrien ever so often, and he was almost always answered by a soft hum from Marinette. Both of them were smiling in their sleep, the two Kwamis curled up next to each other on a nearby pillow. Tom wrapped an arm around his wife, pressing a kiss to her head, enjoying the fact that the two kids before them were safe, warm, and happy. "You think we did what's best?" he asked, his voice a hushed whisper. Sabine nodded. "You know as well as I that we couldn't stop either of them, although we might want to. All we can do as parents is give them a safe place to come home to, as well as the tools needed to survive out there. Helping them like this is the best way to keep track of them, I think. After all, we know that they won't stop, even if we forbid it." "They're good kids," Tom sighed, unhappy with the fact that they really couldn't do any more. "Yes, they are," Sabine agreed. "And one day, Adrien will make an excellent son-in-law." Tom chuckled quietly in agreement, wrapping his arms around the woman he loved with all his heart. The adults sighed, leaning against each other, content to let the two teens sleep, because for now, the house was warm, quiet, safe, and everyone was finally home.